My name is Betsy Kemp, and I proudly serve on the restaurant marketing team here at OpenTable. We're grateful to welcome you today to In It Together. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the conversation, please use the Q&A box in the top right corner of your console. We'll save some time towards the end of our conversation to answer some of your questions. In the resources list section on the bottom left, we have linked out to our registration page for future episodes, our new pricing plan details, an article written by today's guest, Rohini Day, that she wrote for CNN.com, and of course, today's featured charity, Andrew Zimmern's Second Chances Scholarship Fund through the James Beard Foundation. This webinar will be recorded and shared out with all of you afterwards. And with that, I'm delighted to now turn it over to our host of the series, OpenTable Chief Operating Officer, Andrea Johnston.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Very excited to have Andrew and Rohini on the show. For those of you who don't know, Rohini Day is James Beard Foundation trustee, also the owner of Chicago's restaurant Vermillon. And many of you must know Andrew's face. He's a TV host, social justice advocate, chef, and owns many, many restaurants. So thank you both for joining us today. And just one side note, Rohini, you look amazing. Thank you. So do you, Andrew. Anyway, our very exciting topic today during these really changing times is reinventing the industry. And we really want to get some of your perspective on how you're thinking about it for your own restaurants as well as the industry. But before we dig into that, just curious from each of you, I mean, this is a devastating time for restaurants. Can you talk to us a little bit about how it's been for you each personally and professionally over these past few months that we've been sort of in lockdown with COVID? So Rohini, do you want to start?
I'll let Andrew go first for his celebrity and seniority.
Okay.
Thank you, my friend. And thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Andrea, and welcome everybody listening in. It's really been a tale of two cities for me, the best of times and the worst of times. Personally, it's been a real struggle, closing businesses, laying employees off, having tough conversations, remodeling our biz dev plans. You know, I own restaurants, but I also own a production company and a marketing company and a hospitality group. So it's been a roller coaster, very scary. A lot of work. I've worked more in COVID than at any other time in my life in terms of hours per week. But on the flip side of that, what we all complained about the first month, oh my God, I'm on lockdown with my family and that kind of stuff, it really put a lot of things in perspective about where I want to be investing my time and why I want to be investing my time. And I think that in a general sense sort of encapsulates it all, except prevaricating between bouts of hyper loneliness versus beautiful contemplative moments of solitude.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Rohini, can you follow that?
So on a personal level, I think it's been actually quite lovely for me. I've been hunkered into my home with my daughters and my husband. And so it's been almost like a forced rebonding for them, but I'm loving it. And we've gone through 3 months of online schooling for them, which was a nightmare. No graduation, no prom. My daughter's college process, going to Vassar. I'm a Vassar mom.
Go Vassar Brewers!
I'm a Vassar grad.
There you go.
And here.
Who knew? A lot of cooking, a lot of reading, running, Zoom with my girls. The part that I shared with you earlier was no travel, no international travel, and our family thrives on that. Not only am I from India, but I go back very frequently. My parents are in lockdown in Delhi, and that's just killing us. But on a professional level, ironically, even though Vermilion has been closed since March 1st proactively, so for 4 months, and we reopened 3 days ago, it's been insanely busy. not only am I like absorbing every Zoom webinar, everything that I can read on Pulse, how is everyone else doing, what are they doing, but we're engaged with the James Beard Foundation's women's program. We've launched Let's Talk series across 3 cities and many more for 15 women restaurateurs to connect in every city. Andrew's welcomed me onto the IRC leadership. I know he'll talk about that, but that's 3 calls a week. There's all this cohesion, there's a restaurant relaunch, and staying in touch with the team and supporting the team. So it's been, actually, I've never felt closer to the industry than now, ironically.
Yeah, no, I do think that the way that the industry and community has come together is pretty incredible, whether it's through the IRC or at a local level, and it's helped keep us all connected when we're all sort of stuck at home, right? To get behind something, rally behind something, which has been very inspiring to me. Rohini, so recently in a CNN article, you said now might be a great time to break from the past and how you've done things. So I'm curious how you're thinking of reinventing your restaurant. Have you, or what is up to come with Fermion?
Yeah, so Andrea, and firstly, let me backtrack. Thank you for having this forum, you, Betsy, and everyone, and thank you to everyone for joining us. The hundreds who've signed up for this, it's exciting. For Vermilion, we've been around for 17 dog years in Chicago. And the concept is a melding of Indian and Latin, because my philosophy, I've traveled to 55 countries and eaten my way around them. And I've always felt that cuisine in the US, and indeed in most of the Western part of the world, what is deemed as fine dining is excessively Eurocentric and doesn't do justice to either dining, flavors, foods, or what the US population constitutes. So Vermilion, we read it completely, and I'm actually very excited in 3 different F words. The first is flavors and food, and the second is fluidity, and the third is just fervor, our social fervor, and keeping with the times. And when it comes to the foods, I have always had entree drudgery. I love tasting things, but when it comes to getting that massive entree, it's not fun. So we've moved away to, apart from an all-new menu, to small and medium portions, and we've unbundled the accompaniment. So now it's all curated by the guest, as opposed to the deification of us, our team, and our chef. The guest decides. So with their blackened chili tamarind ribs, do they want the lemon rice, or do they want the chorizo potato hash, or whatever? So it's not, you may kiss the chef's ring model. Very excited about the space. Gone stark white, bright, metal wall, fire table, striking wraparound curtain lights, just in keeping with the moment and today. We want to draw an eccentric demographic, any age, from 18 to 25 to 55 plus, whatever, who enjoys the difference. So away from the stodgy models of, which I couldn't stand, Stockholm Syndrome dining, the wine ceremony, the stiff, snooty hostess, all of the things that I personally do not like about our industry. And the third is the fervor, the social advocacy. Our team is young. They're all minority, however you define that. And everyone has been marching and enraged by everything that's going on. So we have introduced a section that I'm so excited about. It's called Beyond Borders, where we're going to feature the cuisine of foods that we think are phenomenal, but have been marginalized, whose peoples have been vilified in our country. So immigrants, whether it's people from Syria or Sudan or Iran, and we've started off with Indonesia because I just love the food and I think it deserves a better platform. So lots to be excited about. And then there's some other stuff on the social justice, but we'll get to that later.
Great. Well, sounds like in all of the things that you're doing, it's just a real energy at your restaurant and with your foods and with your people, which is, I think, critical at a time like this. And I think especially for diners who they're really yearning to go out and to feel that energy when they go into a restaurant like yours is fantastic. So Andrew, you own a number of restaurants and your partners in a number of restaurants, and you were explaining how you've done something a little bit different with each. Can you share with the audience how you've chosen which path with and what you've done with them?
Well, sure. But, based on concept, neighborhood, type of cuisine, the restaurants that I'm involved in, one has been completely closed since March 1st. We closed prior to Governor Walz's mandatory shutdown here in Minnesota. And the reason being was that at that restaurant, because of the kitchen layout, we could not adequately protect our staff members. I believe at a national level, we are having a crisis in how we care for our food workers. That's not just in meatpacking plants and on strawberry farms. That's everywhere along the food system. These are people who historically have been abused. In fact, this country itself was foundationally and systemically created on abuses in the agriculture system. And it is, I did not believe that I wanted to add one moment of discomfort to anyone, just from a philosophical standpoint and from a morality standpoint. Other restaurants, we have patio dining to the percentage allowed by the law here in Minnesota because we can do it efficiently, we can do it the right way. Some have done contactless delivery and takeout, and so it's a hodgepodge. I think that, Rohini brought up a ton of really great, super specific ways in which you engage with the diner in a new way, which I think is something that everyone is going to have to do. To me, everywhere I go that there's a whiteboard, I write down, save the cash, pivot, 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 pivot. That's the 5-step plan. And as I was thinking about this question, everybody pivoted into to-go and delivery. Restaurants that had never done to-go food, had never done delivery, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. I think what's going to be really interesting, because remember, we're just at the infancy of this issue. We're going to be dealing with this, in my opinion, for years and years and years. And rather than try to guess, wow, what month and what quarter of next year are things going to go back to normal, I think this is the time to completely change the pay structure in restaurants, to change the equity system in restaurants, to change who does what in restaurants and how it's done, to Rohini's point about some of her menu changes. The costs have remained the same for so many restaurants. They're all locked in the same utilities, the same insurance, the same lease and rental structures, right, if they don't own the building. And if they do own the building, they're paying a mortgage, right? So right. You have to be super, super, super creative right now. And I think everything should be on the table to try to maximize the dollars. I think as we move forward, there's going to be things that people were poo-pooing a year ago. The negativity 2 years ago, when I profiled a restaurant that had some robotics in it, right. was just, the Twitter shaming that I took for even featuring this restaurant on one of my shows. And we were just, frankly, just saying, hey, what a cool idea. Nobody knows whether this is here to stay or whether consumers are going to like it or not like it. But I've got news for you right now. There's hundreds of robotics restaurants or robot-assisted restaurants that are going to be coming online because it's a way to increase that contactless food delivery. So who can say what the future is going to bring? But I think everything is on the table. The other thing that's fascinating to me is that ghost kitchens were kind of, twinkling along and, some popular, some less popular. Every study that I've seen shows that by 2030, it's going to be $1 trillion industry. And that allows for a lot of flexibility with concept, but it's predicated on a world where a vast majority of our food is eaten, delivered at home to the office, or picked up for consumption anywhere. And that flips the whole script. I still think 10 years from now, there's going to be restaurants where people go in and dine because they want the complete experience. But I think there's a lot of people growing up in the age of COVID, teens now, who in their 20-somethings are going to be very comfortable not dining in what we think of today as a restaurant, which, by the way, in the West is only a couple hundred years old. So right. I think flexibility and pivot is the watchword of the day.
Absolutely. Yes. I remember the first restaurant I ate in Tokyo, where you order on the thing and the food gets delivered out. And it was mind blowing to me. And I can absolutely see that continuing on and not be a unique experience, being far more common on the go forward. So Rohini, you've mentioned, obviously restaurants are closing, obviously capacity constraints are impacting revenues and decisions on whether to open. And you claim that this is going to slash a restaurant's revenue by about 2/3. So what are some of the things that you're thinking about to add on to what Andrew has said about how restaurants should think about conserving costs or maximizing revenues during a period like this, especially if it goes on for the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
Forever.
Forever.
Andrea, since you've lobbed the toughest question facing not just our industry, which is the hardest hit, but every industry. That's not just in the US, but globally. If I can come up with the panacea to this, I want Trump, Steve Mnuchin, and Jerome Powell's jobs, all three rolled into one. But that being said, yes, I do think there's a lot of stuff that we're doing. It is not just COVID that has assaulted our industry. It is, I'd say, 6 things. There's the Me Too movement that's been roiling for 2 years and how women are being treated in our industry. There's race relations, which has just come to the surface now, and thank God it has. There's COVID, obviously, and the health issues around it. There is the economic crisis and clenched consumer demand. And then there's the growth of delivery, which is here to stay, which takes away 30% of your margins. And with ghost kitchens, almost like a private label model in retail, is going to cut into our share drastically. So with all of this, how do we survive? That's really the existential question all of us are grappling with. And all of us are, to be a restaurateur, you have to be not only intrepid and optimistic, but you just have to have a lot of guts. I would be using a different word entirely if I was not on Zoom. So everyone has done the obvious, which is slash cost to a minimum, renegotiated with lessors and fixed costs and done away. Everyone has moved to really lean team models, cross-training, and the guest is being very forgiving of that right now. They don't expect hand-holding by different people every step of the way. So we've done all that. Everyone has moved to leaner menus, and that makes a lot of sense because you don't want to have inventory, you don't want spoilage, you don't want, excess labor in prep. We've done all of that. And there are 4 ways that I see people, you can call it pivot or adapt or just flail your way around, but there are 4 different things I see. The one that started right off the bat was delivery to go curbside. That's number 1. Number 2 was on-site dining, whether it's patio or indoor, but now a lot of people are moving to pop-ups and collaborations and shop-in-shops. It's interesting. And so I think this is like a very fluid, seems to be my word of the day, but really evolving so rapidly. Number 3 is restaurants are getting into products. So whether it's grocery on site or whether it is becoming a marketplace of some sort or bringing the food hall into individual restaurants because food halls are dead. Number 4 is experiences. So chefs are curating, whether it's going into a virtual art gallery with them with a meal, or going to Rick Bayless's rooftop herb garden with a tasting, or whether it is, a whole bunch of other things. So everyone's trying these things and feeling their way around. Not everybody's good at everything, but we're trying our level best. But it comes down to, without solving for the public health crisis, none of this is going to work. We are a $1 trillion mature industry with 15 million employees, 25% of which are unemployed and drive a huge segment of unemployment. We are not, with 2/3 revenue or 60% revenue, we are not going to survive a 2-year haul. And I know Andrew is going to talk a lot about the Restaurants Act and the Stabilization Fund that we're all lobbying and fighting for. But without that, and without the government actually stepping in with leadership, there's unlimited funding for corporations who can raise money in public sources. Unlimited quantitative easing by Jerome Powell, who really wants to stimulate the economy. We're subsidizing coal. We're subsidizing so many other industries. But this industry, which is so vital and which can only be done on site, can't really be removed to virtual needs. Either a publicly funded healthcare model or a publicly funded, family paid leave or paid time off, or just some of the basics of a welfare state that every other advanced economy takes for granted. So now I'll get off my pedestal and let you.
Well, I definitely, so good ideas there. I definitely want to get to the IRC, but one thing that comes to mind is, obviously restaurants are hurting right now, but so are your local suppliers, right? You're the farmers out there, the producers out there. So I guess I'm curious, like on the one hand, the economy sucks, and so diners don't have a lot of money, but also now might be a time that you could increase prices to actually support the local folks that are your local farmers, or to even survive. And I guess, Andrew, you've got so many viewers, that you talk to and listen to, like, it feels like there's a mismatch. I hear so often the restaurateurs say, I can't raise my prices because then people go to my competitors, but some people are willing to pay more to have that great locally sourced food. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that and how we would amplify any changes there.
Sure, it's fascinating. As Rohini was talking, I'm not going to lie, we're friends away from this thing. We've known each other for quite a while, and she knows how I feel about her insanely huge amount of intellect and brain power on these issues. But I just thought to myself, it's a shame we don't live in the same state, because a Rohini Day Andrew Zimmern ticket, I'm happy to be her lieutenant governor if we lived in the same state.
Andrew, let's do it. We can fix this country together.
I swear to God we can. We have complementary skill sets and really good overlapping desire. I do think it's really interesting what Rohini was saying, because even when she was talking about the Indonesian night at her restaurant, or month or week, or doing Iranian Persian food at Vermilion, that's the kind of stuff where, with all the work that I do and a large social following, everyone's always said, where do I get that rice? Where do I get that pot or pan? More people are cooking at home. So pivoting into that grocery space, that prep and store, that ready-to-eat meal space where you finish something at home, I think has a lot of promise for it. The only thing that I disagreed with slightly, which is fascinating because I forgot I'm in that business too, is that I'm in the food hall business, and we do have old food halls that were totally okay with people going into a basement with very little air circulation, and that's a huge problem. Like, there's no consumer confidence for going into that kind of environment. And Rohini's traveled a lot. I certainly have traveled a lot. You see some of the open air markets in so many other countries where the contact is little. These insane lines. It's not like an American food festival in a big city where everyone's scrambling to shove a lot of free food in their mouth. I think there is a solution from a food market, food hall possibility. We're building one right now down in Atlanta, the Works at Chattahoochee, that's a combination indoor-outdoor that's actually taking into account, because we're building now, the actual situation that we're in. We've pivoted into what that model looks like, which I think is going to be really, really cool. What I've been thinking about from the supply side is, and it's really a sad story, farming in America, changed drastically in the 1950s, in the post-World War II era, with the growth of the middle class, the supermarket. People took food packaging and food prep jobs, people who were firmly in the middle class. If you were a meat cutter in a meat factory, you were able to own a home and put kids through college. the United States government essentially wiped that slate clean and allowed these very large companies to start to employ illegal immigrants. And it was the start of a massive, massive problem in this country that touches immigration issues and touches a lot of other political third rails for, the last 7 presidents have not been able to deal with comprehensive immigration reform sufficient to protect this very, very valuable labor resource we have. So on one hand, you even have the current administration, which is banning HB1 and 2 visas for an entire year. That means that there's no one going to be able to pick tomatoes in Tennessee or pick crabs in Maryland or pick grapes in California. They're looking at massive shortfalls. And in the premiere episode of What's Eating America, not a plug at all, but just happens to be right behind me, we highlighted this problem that, quote unquote, Americans don't want those jobs. And in fact, they're highly skilled. These are workers that come in and pay taxes. And they need to be protected. They're part of our brittle food system, too. Rohini listed 8 or 9 different brittle, fragile elements of our food system, from Me Too to the racism, the sexism, the pay inequality, the psychological trauma, the abusive environments, the hours, on and on and on. So as we rebuild, we have to be mindful of that. But we also have to be mindful of this entire network of farmers that in this restaurant growth period of the last 12 years that we've been riding high, we've created farms that have specialty produce, special chickens, special beef. I mean, good luck 15 years ago finding Wagyu in America. Now, almost every farm that raises beef cattle has a Wagyu species of some kind on its property, because that's where the money is. But it's not in supermarkets. It's food that's going to restaurants. So not only is it a what are we growing, what are we raising, but it's where are we serving it. So there's several pivots in there that we really have to be aware of, and we have to be mindful of our farmers. Over the next 15 years, 400,000 of them are going to age out of the business. Who's going to replace them at a time where we're trying to decentralize farming, not centralize it? So we really have a lot of work to do there on the supply side as well. And we haven't even, nor do we have time during this section, maybe in the Q&A, to talk about the seafood industry. Anywhere from 75 to 85% of the seafood harvested in America is sold in restaurants, not in markets. That's a staggering number. So you want to talk about an industry that's basically gone dark? It's the seafood industry. It's really, really scary, and people have their blinders on about the economy. We're in a really dangerous spot. When that unemployment bonus check runs out at the end of July, I think we're in for a very rough August and September. And if the flu season and the C-19 season overlap in the way that our epidemiologists and the scientists guarantee us that it will, I'm very scared about Q4 2020, when nothing is coming out of the ground. We're not able to open our restaurants to the degree that we would like to, and we see a doubling down of illness in America that compromises the number of hospital beds we have. It really is a sort of an apocalyptic scenario. And if we're not thinking, if food people aren't thinking about ways in which they're going to cope and deal with all of that, I think they're making a big mistake. I think these are times that we're going to rely on the group of people, food people, who I think are the most creative, ingenious, and stalwart survivors of any industry I know of.
I do want to add to this, Andre, because you raised a question that a lot of us spend a lot of time talking about, which is quite interesting, given that we're all in survival mode. We talk about social justice a lot, including on the IRC calls, including within the James Beard Foundation, and Anna, Let's Talk, women's group, everything. And we are all, not all, that would be an exaggeration, but a lot of us, including I, have moved away from the tip credit model, because we just don't. We want to pay our employees better, despite this being significantly higher cost for us. And we want more equity across the front and the back. And so it's fascinating how in the middle of this forest fire, we're trying to grow,
Well, this is, but this is why it's what encourages me too. And this is why I think food people are the best people in the world. Because while our own house is burning down, instead of running out the door, we're still trying to think of ways to help the people that are in the building with us, which I think says a lot about the nature of the people. You know, we still have a long way to go. You know, I mean, you talked about the Me Too and the inequality and all that stuff. It's so important. And we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to solving those problems. But we're talking about it. And every month I see new reasons to be more and more hopeful, because there are more and more people into caring for those people. And I personally, I think the whole tip thing and everything, I think there's going to be brand new. 2-3 years from now, you're going to see a pay structure and a financial equity structure within restaurants around tips and all the rest that's going to be radically different than what we're existing in right now. It has to. And by the same token, Tracy Desjardins, I had a conversation series at CIA at Copia, and she was one of my guests last fall. And she closed Jardiniere after 25 years. And I asked her why. And she said, well, I was clearing, 8% a year, but I realized I had to take 5%. I had to take 5/8 of that, 5% of my 8% profit, and put it back into the company for taking care of my employees, right? And when I tried to put a little sign on the bottom of the menu that said we're adding a surcharge to allow us to take care of our employees, customers freaked out. So then she said, okay, that freaks you out? I'm going to start charging you what the food actually costs. And I think that's going to change too. 25 years ago, all of these boutique coffee places boomed and exploded. The reason Starbucks was able to grow into the multinational company that it is because of something called fair trade policy with coffee. The idea was you no longer were going to pay 50 cents for a cup of coffee, you're going to pay $4. But that was because you believed that all those little fincas and farms in the coffee growing regions around the world, that those people deserved a better life. They deserve schools and a clinic and a life for their kids and electricity and clean water. And it was only by paying more for your coffee could you guarantee that those coffee growers would survive. And you're going to see the exact same thing here in this country when it comes to food. Gone are the days that people are going to artificially deflate the cost of a menu item to try to sell you a more expensive, cheap item that's a lot of starchy other stuff and people playing around with that menu mix. We're going to have to pay farmers what it costs for a chicken and a pound of string beans, and we're going to have to pass that on to the customer. And I think cooks are going to have to get really, really creative, which is already in our skill set. So I have every confidence that they will. And I think one of the keys to it is going to be eating less meat.
Yeah. No, I hope that happens. I want to make sure that we have some time to answer some of the questions that have come in here. Betsy, have a number come in? I'm not in the chat.
Yep. A number of questions have come in. I'm happy to break to it now or let you keep going. We can break to it now. Let's dive in because we got some.
Get a couple of them and then give me one final.
Can I just define one term, because it's been brought up a couple times. So let me just quickly in 30 seconds tell our listeners and viewers if they're not aware of it. We keep referring to the IRC. That's the Independent Restaurant Coalition. People can go to saverestaurants.com. That's our website. We are a policy-based advocacy group in support of this $1 trillion industry of independent restaurants with 11 million employees. We're the number one employer of single moms, number one employer of returning citizens, the number one or two employer of immigrants, depending on how you look at it, number one employer of first-time job seekers. It is a very, very special community that almost all of whom are going on unemployment as restaurant. There's no other place for them to be employed in our economy. And at $1 trillion and at 11 plus million employees, the only industry bigger than independent restaurants is the U.S. government. So we're too big to fail, and individually we're too small to fail. And we have a Restaurant Stabilization Act. I would encourage everyone to go to saverestaurants.com. You're able to email your congressman or senator from there. If you believe in restaurants, please go and email your representatives. This is a $120 billion stabilization plan that allows restaurants, independent ones. By the way, first bite at the apple goes to women-owned businesses and businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it is extremely, extremely important that we get this stabilization bill passed so that restaurants can survive. To Rohini's point, we're propping up other industries that actually make a lot of money. The restaurants are a very special community that's a pass-through economic system. And so I would encourage people to go and do that.
100%.
Great. Amen. So many questions coming in. I'm just going to take a stab here. One restaurateur is asking about, with the evolution of takeout and delivery, are either of you or is anyone you know looking at implementing reusable takeout containers as an environmental alternative to foam or plastic disposables?
Done.
Yes.
Great. Can you give us an example of who's doing it and maybe what companies they're using, what suppliers they're using?
I know of some restaurants here in the Twin Cities, and I don't want to speak for them because of health department issues, but essentially, you know those places where you buy a pie and it comes in a tin and you have like an extra $3, but if you return the tin, you get the $3 back. And it's really clever for the bakeries because those people have to come back if they want to get their $3 back, and then they're constantly buying pies and goodies from that bakery. Imagine the same thing. There's restaurants here in the Twin Cities that are selling you for $300-400 4 or 5 meals for 4 people, right? So they're essentially selling you their food for extended meal periods, along with instructions and videos, a lot of cute takeaways, and they're packing it sometimes in customized what we would call disposables. But if you clean them and return them, you get a rebate on there, and it's a way to get customer retention, and you're also being kind to the environment.
Brilliant.
Awesome. I know we've talked a lot about the pay structure and the food supply system, but one restaurateur is asking about what is the number one thing diners or consumers can do to encourage a more equitable food supply system and a more equitable hospitality industry in general?
So I'll talk to that a little bit. And it comes back to your point, Andrea, and the Tracy Desjardins example that you mentioned, Andrew. I'm going to be introducing this surcharge, and it's not just for health, but it's to invest in my employees' education. So it's financial literacy for the women, which I strongly believe in, and continuing education for the men, because without that, there's no growth, there's no incentive, there's no future career. So that and health, and I do think that this whole creative destruction that we've undergone right now is the right time. This gives us the degrees of freedom to play with that. So right. I will be placing that surcharge and taking my chances.
I think the other thing that a lot of restaurateurs, I'm involved in so many national and local organizations that are debating this, and there's so many restaurateurs that are really scared about offending their customers, right? And I keep telling everyone, we have to not live in fear. We have to do what we have to do and express our truth, right? So if you believe that's what you need to do for your restaurant, you need to go ahead and do it. What I would encourage anyone in the public to do, email all your friends, throw something up on your Twitter or your Facebook or Instagram, whatever social media thing it is that you do, and just say, hey, I believe in supporting independent restaurants by accepting their surcharges or whatever their new economic model is. I believe in paying an extra $1 for my chicken. I believe in paying an extra $1 for my pasta because of what those restaurateurs are doing for our communities, right? Not only are restaurants like Rohini's educating people, you heard her outline some really inspiring programs that she's starting, but you got to remember, every mom and pop restaurant, even if they're not doing that, are paying taxes to keep our roads paved and to put school books on our kids' desks and to make sure that the garbage is picked up on Main Street. We collect trust taxes with payroll tax and sales and liquor taxes. So you have to remember that restaurants are paying more public trust monies than almost any other industry. And we don't have workarounds for them, right? We're not doing offshore banking the way that the cruise ship industry is. So I would say that even if you aren't right now going out to restaurants, you can do awareness raising by letting your community know that you're okay with it and why you're okay with it, and start to get more people on board. Because when more and more restaurants open, you're going to be seeing this more and more. And the more that we can support those restaurants, the better off the whole economy is going to be. Not just the restaurant economy, our economy. We have more people off unemployment. We have less people on the public dole. So there's less stress on our health systems. It is a massive, massive fix-it. It's why eating less meat and more vegetables makes sense, because we're going to pay less money. We're paying $1.5 trillion, $1.5 trillion addressing the big four food-related diseases in America annually. That's crazy. It's crazy. So it's all very much a circular system, and it starts with food.
I also think the
100%.
more of us who do this, the more accepted it'll become, and it'll take on a traction of its own and become legitimate. We've got to change our norms from within. Our industry was not doing well even before COVID. We were a single-digit margin economy. We were high failure rate, and we've got to fight for ourselves. And we've developed a much better voice today. That's been a real upside of this whole thing. You know, we've had the time to introspect, and I find so many chefs and colleagues and restaurateurs writing op-eds and speaking and interacting with the public beyond the four walls of their restaurant, much more so. And I think that's very important for us, because we're such a fragmented industry. Unlike airlines or banking or whatever, we're not the big four or the big eight. We are the 1 million. So it's getting that to a collective voice is really key. And I also find that the guests are being so much nicer right now. The few of them that venture out, they crave human interaction, as do our teams. And so this is the time to take our chances and make the most of it to change our norms. So yeah, all for it.
This is all so good. Okay, I'm going to ask one more. Andrew, we were talking about, of course, the pay structure again. What specifically do you think people should consider focus on changing? Like, what is the first thing that we should really come together on?
Well, I think we have a failure of leadership in America, and I think I think everyone can see that now for what it is. I would like to see minimum wages raised in this country. I would like, because if that happens, we then have and a bad choice of words, but a trickle-down effect, in that it forces the hand of a lot of other companies, and it makes it easier for the small independent business to pay their employees more. We have to have pay equity. We have to have paid health insurance. We have to be more like Denmark, right? I mean, we're America. I'm very proud of that. I'm sixth generation Jewish German son of immigrants, right? But I love my country. I want my son to grow up here. I don't want to see America continue to marginalize itself and create a multi-tiered system for people who live here. That's not what I signed up for here in my country. That is not the American way. And so I think we have to have pay equity in this country first and foremost. If we can start there, and we can start to pay people true living wages. I mean, I may be bastardizing the number. I'm sure Rohini has this on the tip of her fingers, but
I do.
It's somebody who works 40 hours a week, making $20 an hour, still can't afford the average apartment in an American city. I mean, it's just when you start to look at this kind of data, it absolutely blows your mind. And so we're stressing people out, forcing folks to work 2.5 jobs. That trickles down to family trauma. It affects children. It affects who gets fed, whether grandma gets her pills or the whole family of 4 eats the last 3 days of the month. People would be shocked to find out exactly what percentage of Americans are actually living that way. But there's so much stigma attached to poverty and hunger that we see this vast majority of those who are dollar poor, time poor, and stigmatized by hunger in this country, not talking about it. We need to do a better job of taking care of Americans financially. If we can do that, and if we can do that in our workplaces, in restaurants, I think we will start to be way ahead of the game, way ahead of the game. And I also think restaurants, which have already started to professionalize more, when the economy was so good, you had to kind of start to offer insurance and do all the other things that other companies do because the competition for employees was so ferocious. We have to carry that with us through this bad economy. I hear people all the time, and it makes me very angry, say, oh, well, it's going to be so easy to hire employees and I can pay people a couple dollars an hour less because I'm making less money. It's actually the wrong way to think about it. If we are generous, if we are, and there's a spiritual axiom associated with this, so it's more about faith than fear. If we give, we will get. But we have to be in a position to give first. I think food people are born to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I also think our federalist structure doesn't work when it comes to so many of these social policies, you know? So, for example, the federal minimum wage being what it is, and archaic and not updated for decades, versus the whole checkered system of state, city, county wages. You know, Chicago is $14, someone else is something else, Seattle is it's archaic and it's nonsensical. Whether it comes to our pay rates, whether it comes to our health policy, whether it comes to gun control, whether it comes to voting suppression. I mean, there are some things that just baffle me about our Constitution, to be honest, but that's a whole separate conversation.
I have one final question because I think we're right at about time. So I'd love to know from each of you, like, these have been hard times across the board for you, your people, for everyone really. What has inspired you? What has kept you inspired and gives you hope for the industry in the future?
Well, I'll let Rohini have the last word, so I'll take care of that, or I'll hit that first. You know, I'm reminded of it every single day because as I make my way around the Twin Cities, I see people serving food. I see restaurateurs operating at a loss, figuring it out as they go, being willing to build the airplane, the new airplane, while they're flying. And while that seems counterintuitive, it's so inspiring to me. You know, the easy choice would be for more people just to throw up their arms and quit. But we all got into this business not to make money. I don't think anyone gets into this business to make money. I think some people get lucky enough that they, you know, something hits and, you know, they wind up being successful financially. But every single human being in our industry originally gets into this because of the joy and the love, the happiness that we get watching people consume food in our premises. They watch that special social interaction and that experience that you can only have sharing the atmosphere of a restaurant and sharing food in a restaurant and with each other at tables. And I see more people in our industry fighting for that, to preserve the spirit of that, even though the delivery mechanism may change. And every single day I'm reminded that food people are the absolute best people. All of my buddies in the restaurant industry, they haven't stopped doing charity stuff. They're just doing them on Zooms now. They're giving away things to even while their own house, same metaphor, is on fire, they're still passing buckets of water out to other people in other houses. I just think food people are the best people, and it continues to inspire me.
Yeah. Rohini?
So the question was, what are the highs right now, or what sustains me?
I mean, it's in such a tough time. Like, what's keeping you inspired, and what gives you hope for the future?
So for me, it's we've spoken about the larger pieces, and we've spoken about the cohesion of the industry and the voice. Those are the professional hopes. On a personal level, it's unquestionably my family. You know, without my two girls and my husband, who take a lot of my bullshit day in, day out and give it back to me equally, it's no fun. My team, who's inspired me, Salarino, who's brought his Morelos Mexican cuisine to the restaurant, and Rahul, who's got his Kerala fare, and Deandra or Rachel, who insisted we have the Black Fist cocktail as a support for the Black Lives Matter movement, or me, who insisted that we make our main dessert a black, brown, and white dissolution in keeping with the times. All of these things have made me a little more joyous and able to sustain this. I'm still very anxious, though. I don't know whether we'll be around in 3 months, despite fighting an amazing fight, and that I will promise you. I'm also very grateful for my daily rum and coke at night. And so, yeah, lots to look forward to. Sometimes I want to have that even earlier.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Andrew, one final question for you. Just tell us about today's charity, which is your Second Chances Scholarship Fund with James Beard.
Yeah, the food world was a place for me to be extremely successful in when I was in my teens and 20s, and I drank and drugged my way out of it. It was also a great place to hide, and my food life almost killed me. But then I sobered up 28 plus years ago, and the food world gave me a second and third, fourth, fifth chance. And I've tried to do right by that and devote a lot of my time and money to social justice causes ever since as a way to kind of pay that back. And I have several second chance scholarship funds in different places. Our charitable recipient is one. I think I've had this, I think we're going on like 8 or 10 years now. And we're able to give culinary school free rides to students who can demonstrate a second chance need. And it's really a miraculous scholarship. I'm really happy that the Beard Foundation has allowed me to carry that forward for these last years. And I'm really grateful to OpenTable and all the people who have a chance to donate to this. If people go to andrewzimmern.com, we also have a resources and partners page where there's a way to donate to not only the Beard Foundation, but to also all the charitable entities with whom I work on a regular basis. It's worth checking out. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about that today. I'm really grateful.
Of course. It's amazing work you're doing, both. Thank you. And that concludes our programming for today. Many thanks to Rohini, Andrew, and Andrea, and to all of you for taking the time to tune in. As promised, a recording of this webinar will be made available shortly. And for all the latest updates at OpenTable, we invite you to visit our restaurant.opentable.com website. Please join us on Wednesday, July 29th for a conversation about bettering your mental health with Ben's Friends founders, Steve Palmer and Mickey Baxt. Until then, please stay safe, wear a mask, and be kind to yourself and others. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.